Transferable skills.
From Cackle Media, this is Transferable Skills. I'm Noah Mishkin. Today's guest is Lindsey Lerner, who shares her skills journey from tour manager into media organizer. My conversation with Lindsey was an illuminating view about embracing the generalist journey. She exemplifies the versatility and adaptability of a true generalist. It's a diverse path of creativity and identity, how you describe your own identity and create that for yourself, as well as how others identify you. It's interesting to consider that those might be different, how you consider yourself or view yourself and identify as one thing, but might differ from how others identify you and describe you. It's interesting to consider that. And also she talks about problem solving in real time. I want you to liberate your mind from the conventional and take in these stories and lessons shared by Lindsey. I hope you enjoy. Lindsey Lerner, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's great to have you here today. Tell me, in the early stages of your career, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do? Were you aware of your strengths and skills?
Great question. I started out when I was young, like 6 years old. I got handed a camera, and that's what I thought I was going to do. My entire sense of existence was, I am going to be a photographer. And I was fortunate enough to have folks that were supportive of that. And by the time I was in high school, I was always working a gazillion different jobs. I worked at Dunkin' Donuts. I grew up in Rhode Island, so we had Honeydew Donuts as well, and worked at CVS as a photo tech. Like, you name it, I've done it. And then probably around 15, 16, started doing photography professionally. And people were hiring me to shoot their weddings. They were hiring me to shoot their bar and bat mitzvahs. In hindsight, I was in way over my head. And I don't think I truly understood the gravity of especially shooting someone's wedding. But hey, when I was only charging $1,000 for a wedding, knowing now that people pay tens of thousands of dollars, I understand why they took the risk.
Sure, they were getting a discount, but maybe they were also holistically, they were giving an opportunity to an up-and-coming
for sure
professional. They wanted to give you that exposure and opportunity,
totally,
which is very generous of them.
Yeah, it's
great for you.
Totally.
Tell me about those risks.
Yeah, I think in those scenarios, it's so much really capturing someone's, in their mind, most important day. And I really, at 15, 16, did not, like I said, understand that. That's why I always gravitated more towards, I had internships at all of the local newspapers. I was shooting for our school yearbook. Those things I enjoyed a lot more, being able to be out on the road, connecting with folks.
In control of the environment and the situation, as opposed to moments that you cannot do a redo.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
It's stressful, I know. I'm not a professional. I do love photography deeply, but the weight is just something that maybe is just interesting to me.
Yeah, it was interesting to say the least. And then as I got older, I was battling between being the very nerdy kid at school, graduated top 10 in high school, president of National Honor Society, all of those things, with also being like very weird and very artsy and very much in photography and identified very much as an artist. And so when I ever said I was going to art school, when everyone else I graduated with was going to Brown or Yale or Harvard or what have you, everyone was like, what are you doing? Why are you throwing your life away?
Yeah. Do you think that people look down upon the creative artist, especially at that early age, where they think maybe they're worried for them? Like, how are you going to make a living?
They're absolutely worried. And I appreciate that their sense of concern comes from a caring place. Doesn't mean that it's not true.
Yeah, I think that there's creatives and there's non-creatives, and that's not a pro-con, better than or less than. It's the same as introvert, extrovert. It's just different mentalities and modes. To somebody who is more traditional, it's hard to see a clear path towards success, and especially income and sustainability for somebody. And maybe they're feeling that pressure that they are internalizing and essentially putting it out onto you and saying, what are you going to do with that degree?
And I always ignored that. I never really cared about that. My evidence was, oh, your kid, even my guidance counselors, most of them were supportive, but I had some guidance counselors, some teachers and whatnot who were putting that concern on me, like you mentioned. And the pushback was, okay, your kid is working 20, 25 hours a week, bringing home maybe on a good week, $500 at their part-time job, making $8, $9, $10 an hour. I just made $1,000 on Saturday.
Yeah, true. And the real cost is, what if you don't pursue those creative
Correct.
opportunities and endeavors? If you force yourself to be quote unquote traditional and sit behind a desk if that's not what you want to do or where your strengths are. I don't know that you'd ever be successful if you're forcing yourself
Correct.
out of your interests and comfort zone.
Exactly.
I shouldn't say comfort zone. You want to push yourself out of your comfort
Sure.
zone. I guess it would be hard to make a case for me to envision success when somebody is being forced or forcing upon themselves to do something that just isn't in their interest or playing towards their skills and strengths.
Totally. And you're seeing a lot of that come out sideways now. I knew it was true then. Was it incredibly difficult to stick to it and to continue to move forward? Yeah, especially graduating from where I graduated from. And there was a very clear-cut path, and I've never agreed with it.
Since you're an artist and a creative, I'd love to pick your brain and ask you how you define creativity. And the reason why I'm asking is because I had a conversation recently with somebody, as a close friend of mine, who is struggling to figure out really what he wants to do now 25 years into adult professionalism. And what he's saying to me is that he is struggling to find opportunities to express his creativity in the traditional roles that he has had. One of the things I challenged him with is, help me understand how you define creativity.
To me, it's always come down to experimentation and having the space to be able to experiment. That's where my creativity manifests most of the time. I have a lot of friends who are, I would argue, a bit more traditional artists. Maybe they're painting, maybe they're really good at drawing, maybe they're good just in different mediums. And they experiment within that realm. Whereas my creativity comes in more through the lens of problem solving. That's why I've never gone after a specific role or specific title or specific job, so I could really, quite honestly, give a shit less about the role or the title. I want to be interested in the problem that we're solving and be able to develop the path to get there. I also think that the imagination portion of it is huge, and being able to have space to be able to play, to be able to work through that is what creativity really means to me.
I think that's correct. To be able to problem solve in unique ways that are maybe not so linear or traditional or obvious, that is creativity. There is room and opportunity in every industry and in every role to express one's creativity however they want to.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And photography for me, what I realized, I went to art school, I was there for a year, and I realized, I was like, I don't enjoy, if I was honest, anything else other than photography. I understood how drawing and 2D design and 3D design and color theory and all of these other things would enhance my photography. I wasn't knocking that by any stretch of the imagination, but I was missing the push that a lot of the other courses that I had taken in different times, I was missing that. And so I ended up going back to Rhode Island, and I transferred to a school that was primarily a business school. And I studied anthropology there, which I was the only student in the entire class. But the reason why I went there was because the head of the department, he also had a background in photography. And so I was looking at the school, we connected over that, and it clicked for me. I was like, oh, like, as much as I love photography and I did appreciate the art of it, the nuance was photography, as somebody who is historically very shy, photography was a way for me to be able to talk to people.
Anthropology is the study of what makes people human and the study of humanity. And as a photographer, you're looking through that glass and you're studying human beings. You're studying subjects.
Yes.
Even if it's a still life, you're still studying how we live and our behaviors and our environment.
Totally.
Having a background in sales, I can sell you on almost any idea, but it's not that big of a leap for me to understand the connection between anthropology and the creative photography that interests you.
Totally. Which most folks don't even know what anthropology is. And so that's half the battle. And as I was in school there, I went from being like the most square, boring kid at art school to all of a sudden when I got to business school, I was the weird artsy kid.
Yeah.
And I was like, you don't know anything about weird. If you think I'm strange, you've got nothing. I went from tie-dye shirts and purple hair to pencil skirts and heels. And I was like, I don't like either of these. And I used that as the catalyst to get the heck out of there. And I ended up down in Chile for a year abroad and didn't speak Spanish. I went there, quite honestly, because I was on the swim team and in high school, and Chile has the world's largest swimming pool. That was essentially all I knew about it. And it was near the ocean and it was Spanish speaking. I said, that's the one. And when I got there, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I get myself into? And fortunately, there was another kid in my program who also did not speak Spanish. And so him and I hung out quite a bit. And I still always had my camera with me, even though I wasn't, formally studying photography anymore. And of course, so he was curious and we started talking about photography, started talking about art. He told me that he was a hip hop artist and he was a rapper. And of course, I had a gazillion questions. I'm an avid music lover. And I took guitar lessons growing up. I took drum lessons growing up. Again, big music fan. And so I was very intrigued by everything he had to say. And fast forward, between the two of us, our combined knowledge of Ola, my camera, and his very real resemblance to Neo, the R&B singer, we booked him shows all throughout Chile. Oh. So that was my foray into the music industry.
How'd you pull that off?
It's still a mystery to me. But we lived for the time that we were down there, the fake rock stars that we were. And we were getting paid. We were getting free food. We were getting free drinks. It was hilarious.
Could you think of a better scenario for a college student?
Oh, not at all. It truly, those were some of the hands down best times of my life. And when we were there was a very real appreciation for art and for music. And music really became the common language between me and my host family. I think before that, they thought that maybe I had some struggles until they realized, oh, like you can play instruments, you can hang, you just really don't know Spanish.
Yeah, that's, by the way, a realization a lot of people need to be more sensitive towards when you find somebody who's judgmental about anyone who is not speaking fluidly the native language. When they're struggling, you can't help but sound somewhat ignorant. And then you realize, put that person in they're on the same plane as you. So stop judging people based on how they're struggling. In fact, judge them the opposite, that they have learned enough to communicate in your native language that's not theirs. It's something that I think people forget often, and it's important to remind yourself.
Agreed.
I'm still learning English.
I feel similarly. So when we were there, it was very evident that people really appreciated what we were doing. And we had a blast. And so when we came back to the States, I went back to Rhode Island. He was from Ohio. And so we had gone our separate ways, but he called me and he was like, Lindsey, dude, you're so organized. Like, you could be my manager. And of course, my year at art school, my half an anthropology degree, and our kick-ass time abroad, I was like, that's a great idea. That's exactly what we're going to do.
Makes sense.
Yes, nailed it. And it just so happened that head of the anthropology department, he also had a soft spot, which I didn't even know at the time, but he had a soft spot for music. And he had done his entire Fulbright scholarship in Tanzania around music rights, around music licensing. So it was very serendipitous how it all really came together. And so he was very supportive of me approaching the music industry through an anthropological lens and allowed me to do, his name's Alex Perullo, shout out to him. And he allowed me to do a lot of self-directed courses, a lot of self-directed study to be able to finagle all of the things that I wanted to learn that were helping me get my degree, but also helping me understand music and music business. It was very evident to us how deeply messed up the music industry was, especially in North America.
Tell me why.
Every single time when we were down in Chile, like I said, minimal understanding of the language and somehow was still able to finesse our way into different shows and generating revenue. When we came back to the States, I was doing the same actions, calling all of these different bars, coffee shops, restaurants, venues. Hey, I've got this great artist. Can you perform here? Sending them the photos that I had taken of the shows, of the fans, of the whole thing, and essentially got laughed at. They were like, that's not how that works here. Actually, you have to pay to play at our venues, or you have to sell these tickets, or it's on the artist and it's very extractive. And that just pissed me off, which got me launched into my first business, which was called Level Exchange. And it was an online platform that connected local bars, coffee shops, restaurants to local musicians. Specifically, we started in Rhode Island. And that was around for a couple of years and got to really understand I was 19, 20, trying to piece all of this together. And eventually over time, I got involved in the broader music industry and started to understand, like Rhode Island we have something. It's like teeny tiny microcosm we have talented artists, we have great venues and whatnot, but it's small. It's not the music industry. And once that started to click, I was on a tour and noticed that we had a photographer and videographer with us all the time. And so it wasn't, again, the behavior wasn't different, but the marketing, the advertising, the media was next level. We closed down the online platform and I ended up opening a co-working and a production space under the same name, Level Exchange. But it was a co-working and a production space for artists in and around New England. And rather than the matchmaking with the restaurants, bars, coffee shops, it was matchmaking with photographers and videographers and engineers.
Very cool. So you basically took your knowledge of photography and art and love of music and turned that into an opportunity. And then from there, an opportunity to essentially promote and a band, a musician.
Totally.
And then turned your knowledge of the music industry into making connect for them and opportunities for them to perform
Exactly.
and for venues to get performers. And then from there, took the knowledge of making those connections into now creating a space that allowed people to come together.
Exactly. And so it was always it was a following of problems and having a solution, and mostly solving problems for people who were close to me. Seeing my friends who were musicians getting screwed over, we can do something about this. And so just continuously continuing to do that.
It's meaningful to solve problems that you understand, that you're affected by. So I think the motivation is there and the passion is there. And it's just about how do you execute on it. Anything that works for you there's a whole lot of people that it's going to help as well.
Exactly.
How long did you do that for?
That was open for a couple of years. And after that, I had a foot in the door as a tour manager. And so I was very much all in on Rhode Island, local music, everything that we were doing there. And then simultaneously, probably anywhere between 2 or 3 times a year would be on the road for either, it could be as short as a week, as long as 3 months. Touring, really understanding, okay, here's what we're doing locally in Rhode Island. Here's what the music industry actually is doing. And so attempting to bridge that gap and be that connective tissue. And so I took a couple of months. I went on a tour, which in hindsight it ended February 27th of 2020.
Ooh.
We got back right before everything hit the fan with the pandemic and whatnot. But during that tour, I tour managed historically for mostly hip hop, R&B, rap acts. And this act was a K-pop act. It was like we had the United Nations on this tour bus. Every single age, race, gender, sexual orientation, you name it, we had it. So any time that we went anywhere, we made an entrance.
I'm sure.
There were some places, especially across middle America, where it was very obvious that we were not from there. You could hear a pin dropped when we entered any of these establishments. And at some points, those interactions, and I had this happen on previous tours, but this was really the click moment. There were some moments in which it was dangerous to be in these positions. And that gave me the idea of an app that I ended up building, which was called Vantr. And the goal was to make going places easy and safe for diverse travelers. And so you could go on, you could make a profile, you could check off all of your boxes. You could be Black, brown, queer, in a wheelchair, whatever boxes that you check. And then you would receive ratings and reviews of all hospitality and tourism establishments. You would receive reviews based on your identity. And you would then be able to know when you entered a place that it would be safe for you to go.
It was like the digital crossover version of a Yelp with a safety pin.
Correct.
What you're actually doing in some ways, yes, you're helping individuals find places that are safe. You're also creating accountability for places no different than any other review platform. If they want to do well, then they have to perform well. They have to have good behavior, follow the rules, and serve the customers in the audience.
Exactly. And so that launched right around that time. Let's call it, January, February of 2020. And so you can see where this is going. A travel tech app in the height of the pandemic.
Didn't get a lot of reviews in the next year or two?
Oh, man, we didn't. And so it was interesting because we had enough data and I learned a lot, and I had never been a technical person. And so going through the process of developing an app, getting it on the App Store, all of the nuance, the ins and outs and whatnot, I've been able to take that knowledge and be able to use that now in a lot of the consulting that I do.
How did you figure all of that out? Were you doing that or was somebody helping you on the tech side?
I had hired a firm to build the actual app, but I was doing the translating of this is what we need to happen. And so really understanding more about product management and even understanding what a product was and genuinely diving into it in that way made a huge difference.
Interesting moment. Let me ask you though, how did you decide to outsource the development? Were you doing that alone?
I had a co-founder in that business that was also not technical.
What was the decision and conversation like surrounding making the decision to outsource the technical app development? And you obviously have to find capital. You have to pay these people to build this for you, as opposed to taking on a third co-founder who might be able to build it yourself. I'm just curious how those conversations went when you had to make decisions.
That was a relatively simple decision for us. Neither of us were technical. We had found a firm that could do it. We could afford it, and we went with it.
So during that process, you're learning how to be a product manager.
Exactly.
And you're figuring out and learning through the process of this how to,
Yeah.
the nuance of all the technical details and things that you didn't even knew existed before that.
Yeah, which lended itself well. After that, I crossed paths with another founder. He was building a platform that planned corporate offsites and retreats, and worked with him as employee number one, AKA doing all the things all the time, no matter what, which is a perfect role for me. I had never had a job before that. This was my first, the first time that I got a W-2.
Yeah.
So worked with them in that, tech folks like to call it that 0 to 1 phase. And so that was a blast. And it was a great way to be able to use all of the skills that I had aggregated until that point. It was information about travel. It was information about tech. It was information about logistics, getting people from point A to point B. I ran the customer success team for the first year, brought on the customer success people. And a lot of that to me is the anthropological informed decision-making as well, of where are these people coming from? How do they need to be treated? How do they need to be communicated with? And that made a huge difference.
Great connection. Tell me about your mistakes you made in that first year.
It's a startup, and every decision is a mistake.
Sure.
You just have to keep going.
And like many startups, you specifically had no experience doing what you were doing prior to joining that company.
Totally.
So mistakes are obvious, they're expected. And so I'm curious what you learned from those mistakes in that first year.
Yeah, I think it was nice. That was the first time that I was an employee and not a founder. And so that was eye-opening for me, what I liked, what I didn't like. Ultimately, I really discovered I don't want to work for someone else. That was a big learning for me. But it was also interesting to have the employee experience the next time that I was going through that experience, knowing what that really is. That made a big difference. I was also they raised a $3 million round, so going through those pitches, raising that capital. That was a much different experience. And then after that, I went freelance and since then, I had been building essentially everyone else's products and services and whatever needed to get done.
That's awesome. And through those 18 months, you had all this knowledge now firsthand.
Exactly. The company that I am with now is called Generalist World, and we talk about it as a career flywheel. And so when I connect the dots backwards, that's what it was. I took one experience and then was able to leverage it into the next, because you're constantly, especially me and my personality, I'm out and meeting people and I want to connect people no matter what. That's my most favorite thing to do. I think you do too. I've got a very Jewish grandmother. And if I could just matchmake people all day, I would be thrilled.
I've got one very Jewish grandmother. For those listening, the concept of a flywheel within business is a concept where the company creates a virtuous cycle of positive action that builds upon each one over time and generates significant momentum and continuous growth. And it's a term that's used often. And I do like the way that you use that to describe the business and methodology as opposed to a ladder.
Totally.
It is this flywheel because it is cyclical, momentous, and continuous growth. Everything that you learn and build upon, you're creating it for those that follow you in your footsteps and for the growth of the company that continues in perpetuity.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that was too, to tie it all together. When Level Exchange had to close, I was devastated. I had started that really young. I had done that until my mid-20s. And it felt like it was my entire identity. Founder, CEO, startups, all of those things. And that was very difficult. When the entity closed, it was okay, I have nothing. And what I didn't realize until way further, somewhat to this day, it was more of the reframe of, no, all of those people are still there. They were there because of me and the work that I was doing and the work that I put into the relationships and building those and the time, effort, energy, resources into all of that. It wasn't just because of the business. And so being able to really reflect on that and then now have some of the mentors and the advisors and investors that contributed to that first business still involved to this day with new business endeavors that I've had has been incredible.
Let's talk about personality for a second. This is really the second identity that you have named. The first one being an artist, a creative, getting into the entrepreneurial business leader world. And now as an early employee of a startup company, there are many different hats or identities that you might with. And I'm curious, what is the reconciliation with identifying yourself as something or being known by something with then changing that and maybe even by the perspective of others?
The only identity, honestly, that I ever claimed was as a photographer. Outside of that, it felt like the labels were being put on me. When I was winning business plan competitions in college and post-college, it was, oh, Lindsey's an entrepreneur. Not necessarily a fan. That's not something that I'm trying to beat on my chest. And I have a different definition of, I think, what an entrepreneur is as well. And so that one didn't fit. And it more so felt honestly like trying on clothes. It was like, how does this feel? How does this fit? Does this actually fit me? Over the last couple of years, I've just lost most of that. And I don't care. As long as I'm able to stay true to my values, that's really what matters to me. And if someone wants to call me something or other, good, bad, or ugly, all power to them.
Yeah. After your teenage years, did you do a lot of professional paid for photography engagements?
Yeah, I did quite a bit. And it was something that I was known for. But I think even now, the nickname that I got was Human Swiss Army Knife. Who do you call when something needs doing? Lindsey. It wasn't just my abilities, but it was also, who do you call when something goes sideways? Either Lindsey will know how to fix it or she knows someone who will. I still have people who call me for tour managing. I have people who call me for photography. I have people who call me to do business development. I have people who call me for sales. And it's because I met them in a certain way, in a certain lane. And then if I can take people that I've met in the music industry and I can intersect them with people that I've met from the startup realm and have them cross paths, that to me is what the whole point is.
You're the wolf from Pulp Fiction. In Tarantino's movie, Harvey Keitel plays the character of the wolf. The bagman, the guy who comes and cleans up problems, solves issues, and figures it out on your behalf.
There you go.
Can I ask you about photography for a minute?
Sure.
What kind of photography do you enjoy the most?
Street photography.
I could have guessed that.
That's my happy place. And I had worked at the newspaper for all of high school. And so being able to go out and shoot on assignment was interesting.
Yeah.
About 2 years ago, I met through a startup founder. Like, I got to introduce you to this woman. Her name's Millie. She started this company called Generalist World. Generalist? I've heard the term before. I didn't necessarily click that's what I was doing. And we immediately just hit it off. Since then, we started working on the business together about 18 months ago. And it's finally feels like an exhale of, oh, this was what this entire squiggly path was for.
Yeah, you're seeing the traction.
Yeah.
Tell us about Generalist World.
Yeah, Generalist World is a media and a membership platform for leaders with nonlinear careers. And so any folks like us who have had squiggly paths, who have done a handful of different things, and it's a way to be able to present and articulate the work that you've done in a way that can be heard, essentially, is what it boils down to. Because a lot of times, the amount of times that I was just frozen and just completely paralyzed when someone says, what do you do? And on a good day, if I was feeling spicy and a little bit more outgoing, I'd say something like, whatever needs to get done.
Whatever the job done, exactly.
And that can be very off-putting to people. And then other times I would get caught up and be like, ugh. And it was always disappointing because it was like, I know, and I have the evidence to back up that I can do anything. But this person who has gone through a more traditional path thinks that I'm a lunatic.
That question is soliciting the answer of photographer.
Correct. Exactly.
And so when you're a generalist and you do a lot of things and you have the potential to do a lot of things and you have a lot of interests and you get done whatever is needed, when somebody asks you, what do? They're looking for a simple one-word answer.
Of course.
And what we struggle with is finding that one-word answer that will satisfy them, but equally satisfy us as a representative of who we are and what we do.
Exactly. And that's a lot. We just launched a course last month called Unboxed. And realistically, it is how to take up space as a generalist. It has tons of exercises in terms of essentially how to answer what do you do. And that small thing, being able to do that gives people so much more confidence to be able to go into, whether it's an interview or they're pitching for a client, maybe they're a freelancer, whatever it is. That's where we've noticed the biggest difference. And one of the exercises is developing your one-liner. At first, it seems really overwhelming because, oh my gosh, how am I going to take everything that I do and condense it into a sentence? And it's less so about condensing it into a sentence, but maybe it's 5 different sentences that you've workshopped so that depending on when you're out in the wild and you're at a networking event or someone messages you on LinkedIn or what have you, you have these 5 different examples. I'm going to say a very much different one-liner if I'm talking to somebody in the music industry than if I'm talking to someone in startups. And I'm going to have in the back of my head different stories, and I'm going to show people rather than tell them what I do.
Yeah, you want it to be concise, digestible.
Correct.
And not blabber on. I think context here, it matters who you're talking to and how you're going to frame it.
Exactly.
Let's unpack some of the skills that help somebody be good at being a generalist and what they do. This type of skills that are commonly found amongst the generalist population.
Problem solving is number 1. We have 650 paid members of the community, and I would say all of them are very high EQ. emotional intelligence is through the roof. Being able, like you said, sales, psychology, anthropology, whatever it is, it's human behavior. That is next level. Communication is a huge one, whether it's written, verbal communication, anything like that. And the other big thing about it, other than the problem solving and the communication, really just boils down to caring about other people. And that, I don't know if that's just biased of our 650 folks in our community, but that's something that comes up time and time again. Is it's not just about solving a problem, which in our current society and the capitalistic society that we live in, we are very much rewarded for. You get revenue, you get money, you get value from solving a teeny tiny problem. The generalists look at things, yeah, we could solve that teeny tiny problem, but let's take a step back and look at the entire system. How are we going to fix that? And that's the discrepancy. I think that this world that we're living in right now is we have all these people who want to solve the big, meaty, chunky problems. And unfortunately, the current, especially monetary situation, is that people get rewarded for the smaller problems. So it'll be interesting to see, especially with the rise of AI, if the generalists are able to, like we anticipate, be able to flex their skills a bit more.
I think so. And I don't think care is uniquely critical to the generalist.
Definitely
not.
But
I do think that it is critically important to the generalist and others, because to solve problems, you have to care enough about the solution. You need to understand it deeply. And the motivation for creativity is that you understand all those parts and components to it.
Exactly.
The more you care about it, I think the more creative and motivated you will be for the solution and for just a solution.
That's it. Nailed it.
Where would you direct people to learn more about Generalist World if they wanted to explore it, understand it better? Where are you found most?
Generalist.world is the Generalist World website. And then other than that, I'm just on LinkedIn. That's where I spend most of my time.
Yeah, see, a lot of your content you're putting out on LinkedIn, and it is always interesting to me.
Oh, glad. Sometimes it feels like screaming into a void, so it's nice to get that feedback.
Lindsey, this has been great. I loved having you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Noah. I appreciate it.
I want to thank Ephraim Epstein for recommending Lindsey as today's guest, and to you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of Transferable Skills. Remember, if you found value in today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, share it with your friends and network. Your support helps us reach more people who could benefit from these stories. Transferable Skills is produced by Cackle Media and music by Cosmonkey. For more references and inspiration on leveraging your skills for successful career transition, visit our website at cacklemedia.com. Follow us on social platforms at Cackle Media for updates, and join our community of listeners who are all about embracing change and growth. If you have any questions, feedback, or want to share your own career pivot story, email us at skills@cacklemedia.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening, and remember, the skills you've gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.